It had been 3 years since Sarah had last seen Lyra. They had lived together in a small apartment, sharing their lives, experiences, and stories. Lyra was an alien from a distant planet, part of a covert mission to observe humanity. Sarah had learned more about the stars and galaxies than she had ever imagined, and Lyra had become more than just a roommate. She had become a friend, someone Sarah could trust in a world that often seemed too complicated and uncertain. But one day, without any warning, Lyra had vanished. There had been no explanation, no messages, just an empty room and a silence that left Sarah wondering what had happened. She didn't know if Lyra had left because of some galactic duty or if it was something more personal, but the sudden disappearance had hurt. It was as if someone had ripped a hole in her life, leaving her alone with only memories and questions. Sarah tried to move on. She went through the motions of everyday life, work, friends, hobbies, but nothing felt the same. She couldn't forget the bond she had shared with Lyra. They had been so close, so understanding of each other's worlds. Even though Lyra was from another planet, Sarah had never felt judged or alienated by her. But now, the hole in Sarah's heart seemed permanent. Then, on one quiet evening, Sarah returned home after a long day at work. She hadn't expected anything unusual. The apartment was as it always was, empty, quiet, and slightly disorganized. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag on the couch, and was about to head into the kitchen when something caught her eye. Standing in the living room, illuminated by the soft glow of the evening light filtering through the window, was Lyra. At first, Sarah thought she was imagining things. Her mind had wandered to thoughts of Lyra countless times. But this wasn't a dream. This was real. Lyra stood there, as if no time had passed at all. For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She was frozen in place, unsure whether to run to her or demand an explanation. But Lyra, with her bright blue eyes and otherworldly presence, was no longer the quiet, reserved person Sarah had known. There was a weight in the air, a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. Lyra looked different. There was something in her eyes, a darkness or sadness, that Sarah had never seen in her before. Lyra's usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a tense, almost guarded aura. Lyra, "What's going on? Where have you been?" Sarah's voice trembled, and she could hear the mixture of relief and anger in her words. Lyra took a deep breath, her alien features softening as she stepped forward. "I owe you an explanation, Sarah. It's been too long, and I should have told you before, but I didn't know how." The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah struggled to comprehend what was happening. She had so many questions about where Lyra had gone, why she had left, and most importantly, why she had returned now. "I never meant to hurt you," Lyra continued, her voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "The truth is, I didn't leave by choice. I had to disappear, for your safety." Sarah's heart raced, her confusion only deepening. "My safety? What are you talking about?" Lyra glanced toward the window as if checking to make sure they were still alone. The city outside seemed peaceful, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. "Sarah, I didn't tell you everything before. I should have, but I didn't want to put you in danger," Lyra began. "I'm not just an observer. I'm here because my people, the Zelthar, have been watching Earth for a long time. We've been monitoring your species, trying to learn everything we can about you. But there's more to it than that." Sarah's mind raced as Lyra's words began to sink in. Her heart hammered in her chest. Lyra wasn't just an alien from a distant planet. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Lyra paused for a moment, her eyes meeting Sarah's. "Humans are more important than you realize. You're not just another species. You're the key to stopping an intergalactic war." The words struck Sarah like a lightning bolt. She stared at Lyra, unsure whether to laugh or cry. What could she possibly mean? Humans were important. Sarah had always thought of herself as just one person among billions, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. But Lyra was serious. Sarah could see it in her eyes. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "What does that mean? Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me?" Lyra sighed, her eyes clouding with sorrow. "Because the Zelthar didn't want you to know. They've been planning something terrible, and they didn't want anyone to stop them. But when I learned what your species is capable of, I had to leave to protect you. I didn't know how to tell you, how to make you understand. But now I know I have to. You deserve to know the truth." Sarah stood still, trying to process everything. The truth. What truth? She felt like her world was being flipped upside down. Aliens, intergalactic war, and now the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Lyra's words echoed in Sarah's mind, a constant hum that wouldn't go away. The truth. The fate of humanity was somehow tied to Sarah herself, to the very species she had always thought of as insignificant. She didn't know how to wrap her mind around it, but she could see that Lyra was serious. She could see the pain in her alien eyes, the weight of the decision that had brought her back. They sat in silence for a long moment, the tension in the room thick. Sarah's heart raced, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. It was hard to accept. Hard to believe that everything she had known was just a small piece in a much bigger puzzle. She wanted to scream, to ask why this was happening to her, but the words wouldn't come. "Lyra, this doesn't make sense," Sarah finally said, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me all of this before? Why didn't you say anything?" Lyra looked at her, her face filled with sorrow. "I wanted to, Sarah. I really did. But you have to understand, I wasn't allowed to tell you everything. The Zelthar are powerful, and they've been manipulating humanity's history for centuries. They didn't want you to know the truth. They didn't want you to know what you're capable of." Sarah's head was spinning. "What are you saying? That humans are capable of what?" Lyra's gaze was steady, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that made Sarah's stomach twist. "Humans have a power that no one else in the galaxy has, a power that can change everything. Your species is unique, Sarah. You have the potential to end the war that's been raging for centuries among the stars. But that power has been hidden, buried deep within you, deep within humanity, and the Zelthar know it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you telling me this now? Why did you come back after all this time?" Lyra's voice was soft, almost sorrowful. "Because I made a mistake. I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark, by keeping the truth from you. But I was wrong. The time has come, Sarah. The Zelthar are planning something and they need your help. No, your species' help, to win the war. But the thing is, they don't want you to help. They want to control you." Sarah could barely process what Lyra was saying. She had always believed the universe was vast and mysterious, but this was something she hadn't ever imagined. How could humans, with their flawed, violent history, be the key to peace in a war that spanned galaxies? "But we don't have the power to do that," Sarah whispered. "We're just people. We fight wars, we destroy things. How could we possibly end a war that's been going on for so long?" Lyra leaned forward, her face serious. "That's what the Zelthar want you to believe. They want you to stay small, to stay weak. They've been controlling your history, manipulating your development, making sure you never discovered the truth. But what they don't understand is that humans are different. You're not just a species to be controlled or used. You're a species that has the power to shape the future." Sarah shook her head, trying to understand. "But what kind of power are you talking about? What do you mean, shape the future?" Lyra hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Humans have the ability to influence reality itself. Your minds are more powerful than you know. You have a connection to something deep inside you, a power that can bend the very fabric of the universe. But it's been dormant for so long, suppressed by the wars, the violence, the struggles you've faced as a species. Sarah couldn't help but laugh nervously, feeling more and more overwhelmed by the minute. You're telling me that humans can change the universe? That we can do something that powerful? I know it sounds impossible, Lyra said, but it's true. It's why the Zelthar want to keep you in the dark. If humanity realizes its true potential, the entire balance of power in the galaxy will shift. They're afraid of you. Sarah looked at Lyra, unsure of what to believe. But why me? Why tell me all of this? I'm just one person. I don't know anything about stopping wars or saving the galaxy. Lyra's eyes softened. Because you're the one I trust. You're the one who can help others understand. You're the one who can awaken the power in your people. It's not just about you, Sarah. It's about everyone. You're the first step. Sarah felt a weight on her shoulders, a burden she wasn't sure she could carry. The fate of humanity, the future of the galaxy, it all seemed too much for one person to bear. But I don't know where to start, Sarah admitted. How can we fight something like this? How can we stop a war that's been going on for so long? Lyra reached out and placed a hand on Sarah's, her touch warm and reassuring. You don't have to do this alone, I'll help you. Together, we'll find the others who can help. There's a network of humans who have started to awaken, just like you. You'll see. This is just the beginning. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing with everything Lyra had told her. She didn't know if she was ready for what was coming, but one thing was clear. Her life had changed forever. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. Sarah sat quietly, absorbing everything Lyra had told her. The idea that humanity held the power to change the fate of the galaxy was too much to comprehend all at once. For as long as she could remember, she had lived a normal life, working, studying, worrying about everyday things. The thought of wielding some kind of power that could alter reality itself seemed like something from a dream. It wasn't real, was it? But looking at Lyra, she could see that it was real. The seriousness in her eyes, the urgency in her voice, it all told Sarah that there was no denying it. Something had to change. Lyra wasn't the kind of being who would lie or trick her. And if everything Lyra said was true, humanity was on the verge of something far bigger than any war or battle they had ever known. I don't know where to start, Sarah whispered, her voice uncertain. I don't know how to even begin understanding what you're talking about. How do we wake up this power inside of us? Lyra's eyes softened as she leaned forward, her posture becoming more serious. It's not something that can happen overnight. This power has been buried deep within humanity for a long time. It's not easy to access, and not everyone will be able to use it at first. But it's there. It's part of you, Sarah. It's part of all humans. Sarah looked down at her hands, trying to imagine what it would feel like to tap into something beyond herself, something that could reshape reality. She had never thought of herself as special. In fact, she had always considered herself ordinary. But now everything was changing. How do you know so much about all this? Sarah asked, looking up at Lyra. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You've known about this power for a long time, haven't you? Lyra's expression darkened for a moment. I wasn't sure if I could trust you with this information, Sarah. The Zelthar have been manipulating humanity for centuries, keeping you unaware of your true potential. I thought that if you knew, if anyone knew, it would put you in danger. But now I see that I was wrong. The time has come. You're ready to understand. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of an entire species being manipulated, of having its true history hidden, was difficult to accept. So, what happens now? What do we do? We start by finding others, Lyra said, her voice steady. I know there are more people out there who have begun to awaken. You're not alone in this, Sarah. There's a network, a group of humans who have started to tap into their potential. They've been hidden for years, just like you, but they're starting to come together. Sarah's mind raced. She had no idea where to begin looking for these people, or even how they would find each other. She had never thought of herself as someone capable of leading anything, let alone leading a group of people who could change the universe. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't ignore what was happening. She had to find a way to make sense of it all. Where do we start? Sarah asked, her voice firming with determination. How do we find these people? Lyra gave a small smile, her eyes showing a flicker of pride. I'll help you. We have to go to the place where it all began, the underground facility where the ancient records are hidden. It's there that you'll find the answers. You'll see for yourself how deep the truth runs, and you'll understand the power that lies within humanity. Sarah nodded, a sense of urgency growing inside her. The more she thought about what Lyra had said, the more she realized that the future of humanity was at stake. There were forces in the galaxy who didn't want them to know the truth, who didn't want them to awaken, and if they didn't act soon, they would lose the chance to change everything. But what about the Zelthar? Sarah asked. They know about this power, right? They'll come after us, won't they? Lyra's expression hardened. Yes, they will. They've already begun to prepare. That's why we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. But don't worry, Sarah. We won't be alone in this fight. There are others who will help us, humans like you, who are ready to take a stand. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling both scared and determined. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming, but she knew one thing. She couldn't back down now. The future of humanity depended on it. What do we do first? She asked, her voice steady now, filled with a newfound resolve. We gather our allies, Lyra said, standing up. We find the ones who have already begun to awaken and we bring them together. Only by uniting humanity will we have a chance at stopping the war and taking back control of our future. Sarah stood with her, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. She had Lyra by her side, and together they would find others who could help them unlock the power that lay hidden within humanity. It was time to fight for their future. It was time to awaken. The night was quiet, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. She and Lyra had left their apartment behind, heading for a place Sarah had never heard of before, a secret underground facility where the answers to the mystery of humanity's power were hidden. The drive through the city felt long, the streets eerily empty in the late hours of the night. But Lyra's presence beside her kept Sarah focused. She couldn't help but feel that every moment was pulling them closer to something she didn't fully understand. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, her voice quiet but filled with doubt. This place? How do you know it's safe? Lyra glanced at her, her blue eyes calm and steady. It's the only place we can go. The records are kept there, hidden away for centuries. The Zelthar don't know about it. It's the one place where the truth about humanity's power is safe. Sarah didn't know if she should feel comforted or worried. If Lyra trusted this place, then she had no choice but to follow. The thought of uncovering a truth so powerful was overwhelming, but she knew that she had no choice. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. She couldn't pretend everything was normal anymore. After what seemed like an eternity, they arrived at an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. It didn't look like much, just a warehouse, covered in years of dust and neglect. But Lyra led the way, and Sarah followed closely behind, feeling a mix of curiosity and fear. Inside, the building was dark and quiet, the air thick with dust and the smell of old metal. They moved deeper into the building, down a flight of narrow stairs that led to a hidden entrance beneath the ground. Sarah's heart raced as they descended, the silence of the place amplifying the tension in the air. When they reached the bottom, Sarah was amazed to see a large door made of metal, etched with strange symbols she couldn't understand. Lyra moved toward the door, her hand resting lightly on the surface. For a moment, Sarah was unsure what to expect. She had never seen anything like this before, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was beyond it. Lyra placed her palm on the door, and with a soft hum, the door slid open, revealing a long corridor lit by dim, flickering lights. It looked like an underground bunker, but far more advanced than anything Sarah had ever seen. The walls were lined with technology that seemed beyond her understanding, devices and consoles that flickered with strange energy. She followed Lyra down the hallway, feeling both amazed and nervous. "This is where it all began," Lyra said, softly, her voice filled with reverence. "The Zelthar have kept humanity in the dark for so long. They've erased your history, suppressed your potential. But all of that ends now." Sarah couldn't help but wonder how much of her life had been a lie. Had everything she knew been manipulated? The thought made her uneasy, but she knew there was no turning back. Lyra had brought her here for a reason, and Sarah had to trust her. They stopped in front of a large metal door at the end of the hall. It looked even more ancient than the rest of the facility, and the air around it seemed to hum with energy. Lyra turned to Sarah, her eyes locking onto hers. "Inside, you'll find the truth. You'll see what humanity is truly capable of." Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. She was about to learn something that would change everything. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "I'm ready." Lyra pressed a button on the wall beside the door, and it slowly creaked open. Inside, the room was filled with ancient tablets, holographic displays, and rows upon rows of storage units that looked like they hadn't been touched in centuries. There was something awe-inspiring about the place, something that made Sarah feel small and insignificant in comparison to the vastness of what was stored here. Lyra moved toward one of the tablets and began to activate it. The screen flickered to life, showing images of humanity's ancient past, pictures of civilizations long forgotten, of people who had built empires and achieved things that were far beyond what Sarah had ever imagined. But as the images shifted, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There, displayed on the screen, were humans with abilities that defied logic, humans who could bend the laws of nature itself. "This is what I meant," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the power you've been given. It's not something you've learned, not something you've earned. It's something that's been passed down to you, hidden away for centuries." Sarah stared at the images, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. People were manipulating energy, altering the fabric of reality, creating and destroying with a mere thought. It was as if they were gods. "But why didn't we know this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "Because the Zelthar have been controlling your history," Lyra explained. "They've used their power to keep you from awakening. They've manipulated your wars, your struggles, your very evolution to keep you weak, to keep you from realizing what you're capable of." Sarah felt a surge of anger rising in her chest. She had always believed that humans were just one small part of a much larger universe, but now she understood that they were far more important than anyone had ever let on. And the Zelthar, those who had watched over Earth for so long, had kept them in the dark, hidden from their true potential. Lyra turned to Sarah, her eyes steady. "But you have a chance to change that. You have a chance to awaken others, to show them what they're capable of. You're not just a witness to history, Sarah. You're part of it. You can help bring humanity into its true power." Sarah's mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. The future of humanity was no longer in the hands of those who had controlled them for so long. It was in her hands, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that away. The days that followed felt like a blur. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what she had learned in the underground facility. The images, the power that humanity had hidden within itself for centuries, all of it overwhelmed her. It was hard to believe that everything she had known was part of a much bigger story, one that stretched far beyond Earth and into the stars. Lyra had explained that they needed to move quickly. The Zelthar were closing in, and every day they waited made it harder to stop them. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was changing around her, that she was caught in the middle of something that was much larger than she could understand. But there was no turning back now. They spent the next few days preparing. Lyra introduced Sarah to more of the humans who had begun to awaken, people like her who had started to tap into the power that had always been there. They were scattered, across the world, hiding in plain sight, afraid of the very abilities they were starting to unlock. Some had already begun to use their power to fight back against the Zelthar, but others were still unsure, afraid of what they could do if they lost control. Sarah's role in all of this became clearer with each passing day. She wasn't just a messenger or a bystander, she was a leader, someone who could help guide others, help them understand the power they held within. It was a responsibility she hadn't asked for, but one that she couldn't escape. The more she saw of the humans who had awakened, the more she realized how important her role was. It wasn't just about fighting the Zelthar. It was about making sure humanity was ready for what was to come. They couldn't rely on others anymore. They had to stand on their own. The galaxy was full of powerful beings, but none of them had the strength, the resilience, or the spirit that humanity possessed. And now it was time for humans to show the galaxy what they could do. As Sarah and Lyra traveled from city to city, meeting with the awakened humans, Sarah began to understand what Lyra had meant. It wasn't just about using power, it was about understanding it, about connecting with something deep inside, something that allowed humans to shape the world around them. Some of the awakened humans had control over their abilities, but others were still struggling to understand them. One afternoon, they arrived in a small, secluded town on the edge of a forest. Here, they met a woman named Elena, someone who had discovered her abilities months ago. She was nervous at first, unsure of what Sarah and Lyra wanted, but when they explained their purpose, Elena agreed to help. She had seen the changes in the world, the rising tensions, the strange energy that seemed to pulse through the air. Elena had the ability to manipulate energy, much like the images Sarah had seen in the underground facility. But she wasn't sure how to control it. Her power had flared up in moments of stress or fear, and she had caused more damage than she had ever intended. She was afraid of what would happen if she lost control again. Sarah could see the fear in Elena's eyes, and it reminded her of her own doubts. She didn't know how to guide Elena, how to help her gain control over her abilities, but she knew one thing for sure. They couldn't afford to let fear control them. They had to face their powers head-on, together. That night, as they sat around a fire in the middle of the forest, Lyra spoke to them about the importance of balance. She explained that the power they possessed wasn't something to be feared, but something to be understood. It was like a flame, she said. If you were too afraid of it, it would burn out of control. But if you learned how to use it, you could create something beautiful. Humanity's strength isn't just in its power, Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. It's in your ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow. The Zelthar may have tried to control you, but they never understood what makes you different. Your power isn't about destruction, it's about creation, about change, about becoming something greater than you were before. Sarah looked around at the others who had gathered around the fire, people who had been scared, people who had lost everything. But now, they were coming together, learning to trust each other and the power that was awakening within them. Elena looked at Sarah, a spark of hope in her eyes. How do we start? How do we learn to control it? Sarah smiled. the weight of the responsibility still heavy on her shoulders. But now, she felt more confident than ever. We start by trusting ourselves. We have to believe in our ability to change, to shape our future. And we have to teach each other, to help each other grow. Together, we can be stronger than the Zelthar ever imagined. The next few weeks were filled with training and learning. Sarah helped guide the others, showing them how to connect with their power, to harness it, to use it for good. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when they all doubted themselves. But they pushed through. They had no other choice. The Zelthar were coming, and they had to be ready. Sarah had never felt more alive, more connected to the world around her. She could feel the power in her own body now, and every day she became more in tune with it. She wasn't just a leader. She was part of something much larger, part of a movement that would change everything. The Zelthar may have underestimated humanity, but Sarah knew they had no idea what was coming. The humans who had awakened were ready, ready to fight, ready to win. The days were slipping by quickly, and with every passing moment, the tension in the air grew heavier. Sarah and the others had trained hard, learning to control their abilities and grow stronger. Each day brought new challenges, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready. But deep inside, Sarah knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The Zelthar were still out there, and their ships were heading toward Earth, prepared to do whatever it took to maintain control over humanity. Sarah couldn't help but feel that the time for waiting was over. The group had made their way to an old, hidden facility where they could coordinate their efforts. A safe place where they could plan without the fear of being tracked by the Zelthar. It was a far cry from the bustling cities they once knew, but it was perfect for their needs. Here, they could plan without distractions, without worrying about being watched. Elena, now more confident in her abilities, had taken a leadership role among the awakened humans. She had a natural calm about her, something that gave the others strength. She had learned to control her energy manipulation, and her powers had become a key asset in their plans, but even she knew that they couldn't do this alone. They needed more. As Sarah walked through the dimly lit hallways of the facility, she felt the weight of everything resting on her shoulders. She had become more than just an observer in this fight. She was a leader, and with that leadership came responsibility. The lives of everyone here depended on the choices she made, the path she led them down. "Sarah, we need to talk." Lyra's voice pulled Sarah from her thoughts. She turned to see her standing at the entrance to one of the rooms. Her face was unreadable, but Sarah could see the concern in her eyes. "What is it?" Sarah asked, walking over to join her. "I've been monitoring the Zelthar's fleet," Lyra said quietly. "They're getting closer. We don't have much time left." Sarah's heart sank. The weight of Lyra's words hit her harder than she expected. She had known that the Zelthar were on their way, but hearing it so plainly, hearing how close they were, it made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. "What's the plan?" Sarah asked, trying to mask the panic that had started to creep into her voice. "We can't just sit back and wait for them to arrive," Lyra replied. "We need to strike first, but it won't be easy. They're powerful and they'll have backup waiting. We need to catch them off guard." Sarah nodded, taking in every word. "So, what do we do? How do we stop them?" Lyra's gaze was intense as she looked at Sarah. "It's not about stopping them entirely. That's too much to ask of us right now. What we need to do is show them that humanity isn't something to be controlled. We have to hit them hard, hit them where it hurts, and force them to understand that we won't just bend to their will." Sarah's mind raced as she processed what Lyra was saying. Zelthar had been manipulating humanity for so long, and now they were coming to Earth to finish what they had started. It was clear that their mission was bigger than just stopping the war. They wanted to keep humanity in the dark forever, to ensure that Earth would never awaken to its true potential. But Sarah and her allies were ready to fight back. They were not going to let the Azelthar dictate their future. "How do we begin?" Sarah asked, her voice steady now. She felt the resolve within her, a fire she hadn't known existed before. "We start by striking at their communication systems," Lyra explained. "If we can disable their ability to communicate with their fleet, we can buy ourselves some time. It's a risky move, but it's our best shot. If we succeed, we can keep them off balance long enough to gather the resources we need to defend Earth." Sarah thought about the group they had built, the awakened humans who had been training alongside her. She knew they weren't fully prepared for what was to come, but they had come so far, and they weren't going to stop now. "I'm in," Sarah said firmly. "We can do this." Lyra gave her a small, approving nod. "I know we can." The next few hours were spent preparing for the mission. The group split into teams, each with a specific task. Elena worked with the others to ensure that everyone was ready, that they could execute the plan with precision and speed. Sarah's team, which included Lyra, was assigned the task of infiltrating the Zelthar's communication hub. It would be dangerous, but it was their best chance at throwing the enemy off balance. As they made their way to the location where the Zelthar's communication systems were housed, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of their actions. They were taking a huge risk, one that could cost them everything. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized there was no other choice. They couldn't just wait for the Zelthar to come to them. They had to make the first move, and they had to do it now. When they reached the communication hub, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The facility was heavily guarded, but with the abilities they had unlocked, they were able to get past the security without raising alarms. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when they had to rely on their instincts, but they managed to breach the inner sanctum of the building. Inside, Sarah could feel the hum of the Zelthar's technology, an energy that seemed to pulse through the air. Lyra worked quickly, her hands moving over the consoles with speed and precision. Within minutes, they had disabled the communication systems, cutting off the Zelthar's ability to coordinate with their fleet. "This should slow them down," Lyra said, her voice filled with relief. "But we have to move fast." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. They had made their move, but the battle was far from over. They had sent a message to the Zelthar, and now they had to make sure that message was loud and clear. Humanity would no longer be controlled. The mission had been a success. They had disabled the Zelthar's communication systems, throwing their fleet into disarray. For the first time, humanity had made a stand, a bold, decisive action that sent a clear message. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The Zelthar would retaliate. They always did. And now, more than ever, it was up to humans to prove. They could stand up to the forces that had been controlling them for so long. Sarah and Lyra stood in the command room of their makeshift base, watching as the data from the communication hub flashed across the screens. The Zelthar fleet was temporarily blinded, but their ships were still moving. They wouldn't stop, not until they had regained control. They were organized, powerful, and they knew how to fight. But Sarah had learned something in these last few weeks. Humans had something the Zelthar didn't: determination. "We can't waste any time," Lyra said, her voice filled with urgency. "They'll regroup. They'll find another way to communicate. We need to hit them again, fast." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this. A few weeks ago, she was just an ordinary person, living her life without knowing the true potential of her own species. Now she was part of a team fighting to protect the future of humanity. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. She could feel the strength of the others around her, each one ready to do whatever it took to protect their world. "Let's get everyone ready," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We move out in 1 hour." The group had grown since their first meeting in the forest. More people had joined, humans who had awakened to their true abilities. Some could manipulate energy, others could move objects with their minds, and some had yet to discover the full extent of their powers. But they were all learning, all growing stronger together. Sarah wasn't just leading them, she was part of them. She knew their struggles, their doubts, their fears, and she knew they were ready to face whatever came next. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unity, a sense that they were all fighting for something bigger than themselves. They weren't just fighting to stop an invasion. They were fighting for their freedom, for their right to live as they chose. The Zelthar had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now they were going to learn that humans weren't just survivors. They were warriors. An hour later, the team was assembled, ready to move. Elena stood at the front of the group, her expression focused but calm. She had become a strong leader in her own right, and Sarah couldn't have asked for a better ally. Elena stepped forward and addressed the group, her voice loud and clear. "This is it," Elena said. "We've already shown the Zelthar that we're not afraid. We've hit them where it hurts. Now we hit them again. We have the power and we have the strength. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." The group cheered, their spirits lifted by Elena's words. Sarah felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. These were her people, ordinary humans, who had come together to fight against a force that had tried to control them for centuries. They were ready, and so was she. The plan was simple. They would split into teams and infiltrate the Zelthar's strongholds, each group targeting a different location where the enemy was most vulnerable. It wasn't going to be easy. They would face resistance, and they would have to move quickly and efficiently. But they were no longer afraid. They had faced their fears, and they had emerged stronger for it. Sarah's team was assigned to sabotage the Zelthar's main power source, the core that kept their ships and technology running. If they could disable it, they would cripple the Zelthar's ability to wage war on Earth. It was risky, but it was their best shot. As they approached the Zelthar's power station, Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment. This was the turning point. If they succeeded, they would have the upper hand. If they failed, it could mean the end of their fight. "We stick together," Sarah said, looking at each member of her team. "We move fast. We move smart. We don't stop until the job is done." The team nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. This was no longer just about survival. This was about reclaiming their future. They infiltrated the facility with precision, using their powers to move past guards and disable security systems. It was a delicate operation, and every step had to be perfect. But they were in sync, working as one. Each member of the team had a role, and together they made it happen. When they reached the core, Sarah could see the glowing energy source at the center of the facility. It pulsed with power, the heart of the Zelthar's technology. But they weren't here to admire it, they were here to destroy it. Lyra moved quickly, her hands glowing as she tapped into her own abilities. She had taught Sarah to do the same, and now Sarah could feel the energy coursing through her own body. It was a strange sensation, both foreign and familiar, but it was powerful. With Lyra's guidance, they combined their efforts to disable the core. It took everything they had, but finally, with a bright flash of light, the core shut down, sending the entire facility into darkness.